Pal, how are you?
Good to see you, man. Good to be on.
What's your take before we get into football?
Right? Yeah. It's one of those where,
Race stuff.
yeah, race stuff. No, I do think as kind of has the narrative has been going into today that there has to be a sale soon. It seems like all sides are pushing for it. I think that would help be a path towards a resolution. Certainly, baseball wants the race here in Tampa or in the Tampa area, I should say. So that's the most encouraging thing with all this.
Yeah.
I can't remember how long it's been since any part of this St. Pete Stadium plan seemed like it was going to happen.
Right.
So I wouldn't even say there had really been hope. It was just the process of how they decided. It's kind of like a couple, is going to break up that hasn't done it yet. So now, again, what you hope is that there can either be a sale immediately or very soon, or I mean, again, I don't know if things would get so desperate or there would be a realization that ownership's not going to change, and then you have to put all your eggs in the basket of Tampa and Ybor and hoping that something can work out there. But like I said, I think the easiest resolution is to find a buyer, someone that lets Stu feel like he can walk away and have gotten what he needed or what he wanted from this. But disappointing all around.
Greg, there was a time, and I'm sure you remember this because you got a great memory. But there was something where you and I were together. I think at 3 different places. I think in the same day or 2 days, where it was like Bucs, Bolts, Rays, and I was like,
right.
Jesus, this is like when you were with the Times.
Yeah.
And I was like, Jesus, Greg, I thought I was, and you were like running into the press box, and it's like the Rays, man. You look at all these other. Obviously NFL's king. We know what Jeffrey Vinnick's been able to do with the Lightning. But Greg, you see this. I mean, your kids have played sports. Like there are baseball fans everywhere. I coached for 10 years. There's baseball all around this state. And to think that this team still has trouble. And I know there's a lot of people from all around the country, right? But you could say that about hockey too. I mean, we see how many visitors come into town, right? When the Toronto's here or Chicago's here, Detroit's here. It's just part of the gig of living in Tampa. But for baseball to be such an apathetic thing where people are just like, yeah, I'll go if I want. Like, this is a huge missed opportunity. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's neat. I literally was there for 1 inning, but I was at the Yankees spring training game when Bowles threw out the first pitch. And it's such a cool thing the first time you're in a ballpark and you realize, hey, baseball's back. Even if it's just spring training, some split squad game.
Right.
Or the first time you get in your car and you hear Rays on the radio. And I love that. I can drive forever if there's a ball. Okay. It's the best kind of something's going on in the background. I don't mind talk radio at all. I don't mind FM radio, but my attention is always kind of captivated. And hockey's probably the same way when you hear about Michigan driving tonight or something. So yeah, like I don't even want to think about the idea of they're not. I've been here in Tampa since '99, so the Rays have been here. It's all I've known as this market having baseball. So the idea of that not being there, you think about St. Louis in football and Oakland now in baseball and football and basketball, I guess, as well. But these cities that lose teams, you're just heartbroken for because it's such a seminal part of living in a city, if you're a sports fan, is having that connection. Whether you like them or hate them, you have that connection to the sports team in town.
Right.
So I'm not a big proponent of ponying up hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money to keep it going, but you certainly wish that they could find a solution and find a combination of public and private funding to keep the team here and to keep that a part of living in Tampa Bay. That's probably where it starts.
Yeah, 1,000%. All right, let's talk some football, NFL free agency, and the big news. Did the Bucs sign a linebacker today? Look out. I tweeted out before. I know you'd appreciate this. This is the part of free agency where everybody is so excited about a backup or a special teams player that got signed, and everybody acts like they've heard of the guy before, but they never have, and they think it's the world's greatest signing for their team. Tell us about the new linebacker for the Bucs that's going to replace KJ Britt.
Yeah, new linebacker and a new corner, both this morning. So, the new linebacker's name is Anthony Walker. A couple years with the Browns. Was with Miami last year. Basically, he and KJ Britt are both Rosenhaus guys, and it kind of seems like both of them could do well with just a fresh start somewhere, and they kind of switch. I don't know that there's a scenario where just as KJ Britt kind of fell out of favor at the end of last year. I don't know if there's a solution where Anthony Walker is a starting linebacker here by choice.
Right.
I would think he comes in behind Servastia Dennis, probably behind a rookie as well. But no, a guy that has been in the league, has started before. Again, didn't have a great year last year, a lot like KJ Britt. So I would just think of him as KJ went to the Dolphins. He takes KJ's spot as someone who can step up and play if necessary at linebacker, but is probably not by design a starting linebacker here.
And then the corner, Mr. Kindle
Kildor. No, not Vildor.
Kindle Vildor.
Kindle Vildor. Trying to get the accent right in the second last name, and I got
he sounds like a movie villain. Kindle
Vildor. I will not accept your demands. So Kindle, I actually traded a couple messages with Kindle this morning.
Oh, nice.
Kindle's guy was in Detroit. If you Google him, the thing you're going to find is Brock Purdy throwing a deep ball that clangs off of his helmet and is caught by Brandon Ayuk for a touchdown. So that's what Detroit people remember about him. That's probably why they're kind of okay with him being gone. What he should be is Tavierre Thomas. The Bucs lost Tavierre Thomas to the Vikings. Tavierre was a big special teams guy, had 2 blocks last year. Vildor, to say it correctly, I think had 220 snaps on special teams for Detroit last year. Kind of got pressed into duty because they had a lot of injuries in their secondary. But in the grand scheme of things, he's probably like a 4th corner and a special teams guy here.
Okay. And then we also see Kyle Trask coming back, and you did some great investigative research there with this is Mike Greenberg just doing some incredible bookkeeping again. And just take us through that situation on how they were able to bring him back and if it surprised you at all, because I wondered if Kyle Trask was going to be able to go out and possibly fight for a starting job somewhere. I know some people thought maybe a place like Indianapolis would be a spot, but obviously we know that that's not going to happen now with Anthony Richardson in the big time battle of his life now. So what do you think about the whole Kyle Trask situation?
Yeah, a little surprised he's back, honestly. Obviously, Kyle, to know it's not his fault, but just got stuck behind 2 really durable quarterbacks that won't come off the field. So there's not many quarterbacks. There's not many teams you can go to where the number 2 quarterback really had no meaningful snaps for 4 years. Right. It's you knock on wood if you're a Bucs fan, I'm sure. But I was surprised, and I had thought, again, Kyle's had his share of waiting and being a backup throughout his career. I really thought he would seek a place where, to be frank, they had a crappier quarterback. Okay, right. Where even if the team situation isn't great, just one where either a rookie's not ready, let's put Trask in. The starter threw 3 picks. Okay, let's give someone else a try. I thought he needed that because right now he's in that role where if Baker doesn't get hurt, you forget that he exists. So the idea that it's been 4 years here, and however many passes, not many passes at all. Right. I think that tells me that he probably didn't have a lot of interest or a lot of good opportunities anywhere else because I get that he's lived in Tampa for 4 years, getting married. Absolutely. The stability of living in the same city, close to where you went to college, all those kind of things. That's all great from a football standpoint, especially with the new offensive coordinator. There's not even continuity of being in the same offense here. So my thoughts going into Trask in this offseason were 3 teams in that go to Jacksonville where Liam Cohen, and they went with Nick Mullins. Carolina, where he had a year with Canales, they brought back Andy Dalton, who certainly serves a good purpose there as a veteran mentor to what they have in Bryce Young. And honestly, I thought Washington was a possibility. Okay. Brian Johnson, the quarterback's coach there. The 3 years that Trask went off in Gainesville, Brian Johnson was his coach there. So I thought there was maybe a window where if Mariota didn't come back or if Mariota was too expensive, they'd turn to him. And that's a really inexperienced 1-2 at quarterback, if you will. But I thought that was viable. So once Mariota came off the board yesterday, I was like, wow, I wonder if he comes back. And it's not going to be a ton of money. It's under $3 million, which is cheap by NFL backup quarterback standards. It only counts about $1.3 million against the cap because the Bucs had that cool salary cap loophole they're using. So yeah, it's one of those where he's back. It's kind of more of the same. If something happens where they have a quarterback injury, I think they trust him immensely, but it's not because he's done anything meaningful in the last 4 years.
And I wonder too, because you have Pratt there as well. So is Kyle Trask I'm looking around the league, right? Injury. Kyle Trask, one of those guys? Is he on that short list that people will ring up the Bucs and try to give him a chance? Right? Is that too far
Oh,
fetched?
like if it were August and an NFL starter got hurt,
Right.
I think you could see. I don't know. The Trask is going to merit some high draft pick,
Right.
but I think the Bucs like Michael Pratt enough and would be okay with him as a 2. Again, less experienced than Trask, but they're kind of both
Mm-hmm.
almost starting from scratch as playing experience goes. So if a team lost a quarterback and wanted to, you know how you kind of can get teams where they'll give you a 6th-round pick for something they wouldn't ordinarily care about. I could see that happen. It's kind of like what the Eagles just did with Kenny Pickett. Eagles like Tanner McKee, so they're okay trading Kenny Pickett to Cleveland to get a 5th-round pick. Yeah, it's one of those where, I mean, again, there's a world where something happens and Trask has 10 starts this year. And there's other ones where he might not dress and Pratt might be the 2. So, I mean,
Right.
he's probably closer to 3 than he is to 1 right now is the problem.
Yeah, it's a good point. A lot of people are asking about CJ Mosley because
Yeah.
of that linebacker position, a veteran, right? He's been around this league. What are the chances the Bucs bring in? Because it seems like all the free agents that they're going to bring in from here on out are going to be more of the, the low salary guys, backup special teamers,
Right.
and then fill everything else in with, the guys in the draft or undrafted free agents. Is there any more wiggle room? Because we do know, and
Yeah.
you brought this up, there's going to be some restructuring here very soon. It'll be announced. They gotta do something. And you said Wirfs and Winfield, right? Those are the 2 guys that'll be
Yeah, Wirfs
restructured.
and Winfield get you like $35 million,
Yeah.
which covers everything they've done and probably gives you $15 million to kind of have operational expenses and stuff like that. There's other guys they can restructure they want to, but those are the 2 logical, easy. They've got long contracts where it's the money you save this year gets spread out over 4 or 5 years, which is
Right.
nice. As it relates to CJ Mosley, he turns 33 this summer. And what I would tell you is that if you have a 33-year-old linebacker on the field, you don't want him to be the young guy of the 2.
True.
So again, we've seen what Lavonte David has done to be absolutely ageless and timeless and to play at a high level at an age where very few linebackers do. It's probably putting a little too many eggs in that basket to try and do it twice and to lean on a 33-year-old and a 35-year-old. Leadership, captain, brings all those things. I think right now to see what they did to bring in Walker today, it seems to line up like I think it'll be David, a rookie, Dennis, and those 2 could be kind of interchangeable, but those should be your top 3. And then you're looking at Anthony Walker might be the 4. If they bring J.J. Russell back, he's the 5. You got Deion Jones in there. He could be a serviceable backup linebacker as well. I would think that's a position you want to get young at, and the best way to find a starter is to put a 1st or a 2nd-round draft pick into an inside linebacker next month.
I want to ask you about that in a second, but I want to go back to something I was just thinking about when it comes to these positions that the Buccaneers are looking at, right? And looking at getting Lavonte David in there and the linebacker, and you want to get young, right? I mean, that's the big thing is like in certain spots, they got to get legs. And I think at the linebacker spot, that's something we have to certainly be cognizant of. And kind of, I guess, going into the draft pick discussion, because they brought in Hassan Reddick, do you think that, I don't want to say eliminates them from going to get an edge, but does that make it kind of lean? Maybe if you had the choice between an edge and an inside linebacker, do you lean maybe towards the inside linebacker position?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, there's definitely now a much more pressing need at inside linebacker. Okay. To me, if you put a high draft, I mean, if the right edge fell to them at 19, if there's a guy you thought was going to be, if Jalen Walker, who you thought was going to be gone at 10, is there at 19, right, it wouldn't surprise me at all. You can't overstock your edge rusher room. Okay. Right. You want to have as much talent there as possible. But I do think if you put a high draft pick into the position the same year you get Hassan Reddick, you're now actively stifling Chris Braswell is the problem. Yeah. You put a 2nd-round pick in him last year. They like him. They believe in him. So for them to suddenly like a guy that much more that you say, okay, we're okay with Braswell being, the 5th edge?
Yeah.
Where you're barely on the roster. You're barely dressing. You're essentially a special teams player. I don't think they would do that by design. It would only be a situation where somebody completely falls to them they would not expect. Jahad Campbell's off the board at 19, and one of these top 4 edges that we all think is gone by Atlanta at 15 is still there at 19. Then, hey, maybe. And you just kind of have depth at one spot and a little bit less at another. You can put a second round pick into a linebacker and still address it if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I think, like I said, I don't think they want to hamstring Chris Braswell's development by taking a higher asset and putting it in front of him.
So corner, I guess, is another spot too, right?
Corner
Corner is
makes sense.
like, because I've always said that I think you have to be very weary of the positions where there's numbers attached to them, whether it's rotational or whether it just depends on your scheme. So whether it's a wide receiver, right? Because sometimes Mike and Chris are out there, sometimes they're not out there. Your defensive line, you're going to get your rotations. We've seen it in years past where it was like, hey, look, Vita's not out there. It's Nacho or it's Greg Gaines, who's also coming back. And then corner, where sometimes you play with 2, sometimes you play with 4 or 5. I think that cornerback position is going to be key for this team. And I think you and I have spoken about this before of like, Todd loves his guy, his type of corner. But I wonder, does he change his perspective of the type of corner he brings in? Because, yeah, those guys are bigger and they can tackle in space, so they can do some of the things like that. But you're also usually playing some soft coverage, giving up a lot underneath, and they don't pick off the ball very much. So I understand that he has a type, but he probably has to adjust his type a little bit if he wants to try to get more turnovers on the back end. We know Todd wants to do that.
Yeah, corner's tricky in that, like, everybody has wanted Jamel Dean to be cut by now. And I don't think there's no reason for the Bucs to cut or trade Jamel Dean until they have a replacement in place. You just don't take away a starter unless there's somebody you at least would be cool with stepping up. And the Bucs really don't have that at corner. Bryce Hall would have been that guy a year ago.
Isn't it the same thing? Sorry, Greg. Isn't it the same thing with Devin White and Rashad White? Because, like, as soon as Bucky started overtaking Rashad White, everybody was like, well, let's see if we can trade Rashad. It's like, whoa. Yeah. You don't want to trade him. And even Devin White, like, towards the end of his career, when KJ Britt took over, it was like, just get rid of Devin White. It was like, if KJ goes down, like, you know what I mean? You don't want to start getting rid of players because that's when your depth gets challenged quick.
Right. Absolutely. And this is a team, again, you want to be able to insulate yourself against a single injury to where if this guy goes down, there's still a guy behind him you feel pretty good about. 2 injuries at just about any position, you're going to be scrambling. But so like Rashad, people are like, oh, why are you paying Rashad $3 million to be back at running back? It's because Bucky can get hurt. And if Bucky goes down, you like Sean Tucker. You don't want Sean Tucker to be getting 70% of the snaps probably. So, it's just smart depth. It's like the fact that if we think about the corner they got of Ildor today as replacing Tavier Thomas, he's not even really on the radar defensively. That's really a special teams hire. So they not only have to, you want to either bring Bryce Hall back and hope that he's healthy or replace him with somebody in kind. There's still some good, again, everybody wanted A-list corners. They're not going to go out and spend $18 million on somebody right now. So they got to pay Zion McCollum here in the next year. But I do think there's a medium ground, a middle ground where a guy like Rasul Douglas. Okay, Rasul Douglas hasn't signed in this initial wave, so his numbers going down. I think he wanted to go to Green Bay. Green Bay went another direction at corner and paid somebody well, so that's off the table now. So I think he's one guy who, again, ball hawk, long, lanky. Yeah. He would make sense. And I don't know if he comes in and Jamel goes out or if they keep them both. And now all of a sudden, maybe corner isn't such a big need, Corner is probably a position you need to put a high draft pick into regardless of whether you need a corner or not. You think about the Eagles. Okay, the Eagles did so well this year. They had Bradbury, they had Slay. They still put their first 2 picks in the corners and won a Super Bowl with 2 rookies out there, okay? And you've still got Slay back there if you need him. But if you want to lean on the rookie, you can. So I think that's a window where you could see that, where this year Dean's still there. There's a first or a second round pick that once he's ready, they want to hand the keys to. Okay. But you want to have that veteran to be there to kind of hold things until he's ready. So like I said, I understand why they haven't done anything with Jamel Dean. I wouldn't rule out a mid-tier veteran signing. That would be smart for them. They're not done. Just because they're hitting on the bottom 10 of the roster with special teams linebackers and special teams corners, it doesn't mean they're done with addressing bigger needs, and the draft will help with that too.
So the Bucs aren't done in free agency, you're saying, you think?
I don't think so. If you look, it's 6 guys they've re-signed.
Yeah.
It's 4 guys they've brought in. None of the ones they brought in except for Reddick are big dollar guys at all. So I think it's very possible they're at the 1-year contract level of free agency where everybody comes in and it's a 1-year prove it deal. That's kind of what their model has been last couple of years. But I do think that can get an impact guy if they don't bring Justin School back. Okay, they've got to get a tackle they trust to step in and be a starter when either tackle gets home. I don't think that guy's on their roster right now. So I mean, it's kind of like if you don't sign somebody you thought you might re-sign, then you have to find a replacement, and that's probably where they are. I don't know if they're aggressively chasing corner, tight end. There's lots of positions they can go to. The draft is, I mean, you have 6 draft picks. Realistically, you're going to get about 4 starters out of those 6. There's lots of other needs they have and ability and places they want to upgrade. So they're not done. They might be done with the big flashy $10 million guys, but they're not done.
Yeah, you say 4 out of 6. You know what, Jason Light, it could be 6 out of 6. He could have a couple of undrafted free agents that start too.
Right?
That's what I wanted to ask you. Servassier Dennis. So I remember last year, Todd said something, and they were talking about him, and it was a very vague answer, and it stood out to me. Same way that when Liam Cohen said early last year about the 3 running back system, there's sometimes these things stick in my brain. And the way that Todd spoke about Servassier Dennis, it was a very weird, all right, well, he's not going to be available this season. And it didn't sound, because usually a guy gets hurt almost like Chris Godwin gets hurt, boom, boom, boom. Yeah, he's going to be training all of a sudden, so he'll be ready for next year. I didn't really get that same sense from Todd when speaking about Servassier Dennis. Almost like it was, I don't want to say it was an injury that's going to end his career, but something that possibly was going to affect him. Do you remember that at all? And
I don't. And honestly, Jay, honestly, it's one of those where, I mean, my understanding was that Dennis would be good for OTAs. I mean, I think what he had done with his shoulder was something that had bothered him going back to college.
Maybe that's what it was. So they're thinking that if they that they took care of it in the offseason, it's not going to be an issue anymore.
I do. I think, again, I can't say I've had specific conversations about this, but I do think they have every expectation he won't be limited by injury. He's definitely been someone who's been setback, who's hurt himself by being injured much of the 2 years he's been here. But I don't think it's anything where he starts with that shoulder acts up again or something. No, I think they have high expectations for him, to where, again, even if you draft a rookie, I think they're excited about Servassier Dennis at least having some kind of situational role in passing situations as part of a sub package. If you go back to Detroit, you go back to the first month of the season, he was coming on. I mean, he was definitely somebody that, for all the issues they had with the middle of the field for the last 3 months of the season, with guys being wide open, with Britt not being fast enough to be on the field every down, Dennis solved those problems. Dennis would have been the answer. They just lost him to a season-ending injury. So all they can do is get him ready and hope that he's healthier in 25. But he's somebody they like and are excited about.
Yeah, me too. Can't wait to see him out there, and hopefully he can stay healthy for the majority of the season. And, I would be remiss if I didn't mention before I let you go, Joe Tryon moving on to the Cleveland Browns. It just didn't work out here for the Bucs, man. Every year he was the sexy pick for 10-plus sacks, and it never came to fruition, Greg.
Yeah, and Joe, honestly, I mean, nice guy. It's one of those where, honestly, you look back and it's one of those where it's not his fault he's a first-round draft pick. Joe is a guy, you look at that 21 edge class, it is not a good edge class, okay? There's not, it's like you talk about Osai and some of these other guys that were mocked to the Bucs. There's not one where it's like, they should have taken that guy. It's just they needed an edge rusher in a year that didn't really have a lot of edge rushers. I think Joe did a lot of things that don't get appreciated in terms of being able to fill a bunch of different roles. But again, if you're an edge picked in the first round, everybody wants double-digit sacks. They don't want 4 and 5 sacks. It's kind of like Anthony Nelson. Okay, Anthony Nelson, all he's ever been is a 5 or 6 sack guy. But because he came as a 4th-round draft pick, it's always been like, oh, wow, that's great. You're getting value from a 4th-round pick. He's in year 7 now. Has never been more than a 6 sack guy. But people love him because he came in with low expectations and he's always made good on them. He's come up with big plays. Sometimes you get really hurt by the expectation you come into the year with. So for Joe, I'm excited that he goes to Cleveland as just a guy in a $4 million contract. And if he gets 5 sacks for them this year, it's great. Rotational player helping out. It's a different perspective on things. And for Joe, it's probably good to reset himself and have a fresh start, where not everybody that sees him is disappointed by him and wants more from him. And instead, it's just a chance, hey, relax, play ball, go out there and make plays. Myles Garrett being on the other side is a nice problem to have in terms of he's not going to be catching anybody's priorities on offense making sure they know where Joe is on the field at all times. So that helps. And again, if being the guy opposite Myles Garrett, and he's not the only guy they have opposite Myles Garrett, but if you on the other side of him, it's kind of like Greg Gaines. Greg Gaines got to line up next to Aaron Donald.
Yeah,
for his first 4 years in the league. That's going to help somebody, So there's a world where, again, Joe has better opportunities. Joe gets to the quarterback a little more successfully, gets 9 sacks. Now he's making double as much for somebody else a year from now. He's probably the same guy he was here in Tampa. It's just things can change in a hurry.
You got that right, buddy. Greg Auman, Fox Sports, always breaking it down in the best way. Greg, I appreciate your time, my friend. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your week, pal. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Always happy to be on. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, buddy.